On this past Christmas Day, the Drake Hotel, an apartment building that housed both overflow people from a homeless shelter as well as people who live far below the poverty line, burned. The 200 residents were almost all without options to find a new place to rent, little or no savings, and an impossibly tight and overpriced renters market in Minneapolis, made for folks out in the cold. Fairly quickly, the Drake residents who had nowhere else to go were housed by the county at a motel in Bloomington or at the First Covenant Church shelter in downtown Minneapolis. Align Minneapolis, which was formerly known as the Downtown Congregations to End Homelessness, was involved in some of the arrangements that supported these folks. First Unitarian Society is a member congregation of Align. At one of our meetings, the Align director, Joe Kreisman, said that this was a catastrophe in the midst of a crisis. A catastrophe in the midst of a crisis. He meant that there's an ongoing housing crisis in Minneapolis, both low income and affordable housing, and the Drake fire was a catastrophic blow in the midst of an ongoing crisis. Before that fire and the news coverage, I'm embarrassed to say that I had never heard of the Drake Hotel, and I've lived in Minneapolis for a quarter century. It simply did not touch my life, and I do justice work with a congregation that is situated near downtown and that supports work with people experiencing homelessness. It's not because I didn't care, but I think because of busyness, other issues, so many irons in the fire, so to speak. Wow. That's what I think today about the pandemic. It is pointing to a catastrophe in the midst of a crisis. It points out inequities that are there all the time that I do not have to see or have time to see unless made to look. By definition, the long-term ill effects of any crisis will fall most heavily on those who live and die in the margins. People who do not have reliable housing or adequate health care, who are living paycheck to paycheck, working, perhaps now unable to work, several jobs to stay afloat. Or we see now that some of our most essential workers are underpaid, without sick and safe time, and without proper equipment to stay safe and healthy. And this is true of the coming climate crisis as well. Surely, if left unabated, the climate crisis will make life unbearable for all of us, but for some, much sooner than others. How is the pandemic like the climate crisis? Yale Climate Connections, a nonpartisan multimedia service that provides daily content on the issue of climate change, said this week that observing the national US political leaders' response to the coronavirus pandemic has been like watching the climate crisis unfold on fast forward. The current administration has passed through 5 stages of science denial in the face of both threats. First, it's not happening. Second, it's not our fault. Third, it's not that bad. Fourth, solutions are too costly. And fifth, it's too late. It is not possible to create strong and resilient public policy from these postures of negligence, avoidance, and pandering. Our actions in the face of the pandemic, staying at home, suppressing our need to buy and fly, staying still, doing what seems like a very hard thing, is indeed possible and is indeed making a difference already. Not only are we flattening the coronavirus curve in Minnesota, but the environment the world over is showing signs of rejuvenation. Clear skies in Los Angeles, bird song heard on Fifth Avenue in New York City, quieter skies over my South Minneapolis home as 94 air routes have been suspended from MSP. It's not too late, and we can We are making a difference. Indian-born author Arundhati Roy has been oft quoted this week after she wrote that the pandemic is a portal, allowing us to see what we did not see before, and also to see what we could be in the future. She says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gate between one world and the next. Yesterday, more than 60 people joined our climate justice team for our Turn Down the Heat event online. We had a big weekend planned where we were going to all meet in person. And once that was scrapped, this team pivoted to bring our content to an even wider audience online. That's the kind of innovative and inspiring thinking that is needed in the face of the climate crisis. No one person has to know or do everything, and everyone contributed a bit, even by their presence and encouragement. Catherine Jordan, lifelong FUS member, was the principal cat herder for our efforts. And she shared these 3 essential questions that we need to ask about our climate future. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? Yes, yes, and it remains to be seen. We learned about 10 things you can do to address climate change by 2050, things like electrifying everything, overbuild renewable generation, plant lots of trees, change agricultural practices, price carbon aggressively, stop financing and subsidizing fossil fuel, and educate societies, especially women and girls, in family planning. These are not impossible. They are concrete, actionable items that society can take on. And we are continuing to build capacity, community, even in this time of pandemic, to do it. We learned about food waste and sustainable eating, about electric vehicles, about the household carbon tracker from the Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. In fact, it was debuted in our presentation yesterday. A resource document is being shared in the chat here that links to many of the things we talked about yesterday. This week, FUS member Madeline Chiochi reminded me that it's hard for us as a society to be motivated by solving complex issues. Individuals are motivated by those complex issues, but it's hard as a society to find that motivating. We can get stuck. And when we are taught the lessons of overconsumption, we often feel like we can't do anything right. Does that sound familiar to any other justice issues you can think of? What Madeline says is that learning new ways of being, of creating relationships with our things, limiting our consumption, and seeing the things we have as items of beauty and worth rather than trash, can help our over-consuming ways, and even perhaps boost our endorphins. When we cease to scratch the itch of consumerism, we can gain peace and well-being, not more stuff. We ended our presentation yesterday with a lovely slideshow from FUS member Keith Heiberg, which you will see later. The photos Keith curated reflect a time before the coronavirus when we were able to gather in person to make our voices heard. Keith suggests that during Earth Day celebrations from April 22nd to 24th, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, we use one or more of these messages to put in our windows, on social media, in our yards, the windows of our cars, on our bikes, wherever we can make it visible. On Friday, the folks who gathered outside the governor's mansion in St. Paul were crowded together without masks, without concern for their fellow citizens, apparently without understanding the problem or the need to believe in the results of science. They were protesting for Governor Tim Walz, bless him, to open the state. It is unconscionable that these folks were willing to endanger not only their lives and their children's lives, but their neighbors' lives through their need to have life work out the way we want it to. We need to create resilience in ourselves and help foster it in others so that we are willing and able to step up and do hard things. To mitigate the climate crisis, like flattening the coronavirus curve, we will be asked to make hard decisions, to be inconvenienced. To be resilient is to be liberated from the bounds of what has been, to imagine how we can become something better, stronger, freer of past expectations. Rihanna Gunn Wright of the Roosevelt Institute, writing in the New York Times this week, said, "I've always believed in America, not in our inherent goodness. I am too Black for that, but in our sheer animal will to survive. Crisis after crisis, our country has evolved to meet the moment, even if that meant changing the way we thought the world worked or striving to upend the imbalance of power." She continues, "COVID-19 and the economic collapse it has caused have laid bare how connected our problems are. We need to design the stimulus not only to help the US economy recover, but also to become more resilient to the climate crisis, the next multi-trillion-dollar crisis headed our way." Close quote. This pandemic has shown us in a way we've never quite seen how exquisitely interconnected we are, the exquisite and exquisitely fragile interconnected web of which we are a part. In Peter Mayer's song, Ocean Mary, our girl has a magic dream, and in it, she imagined that inside her stirred all the waters of the earth, every puddle, every creek, and every one of the seven seas. Her front is day, her front is day, her back is night. She recollects the dawn of life. Tidal waves run up her spine and lightning tingles when it strikes. Like Mary, like the story David read, our hearts can hold everything, all the darkness and all the light. Our liberation is tied up with building our awareness, taking this time we have been given to see, really see that we must change, that we can change, and yes, that we will change. So may it be.
Standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Hi. Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.